Greetings, Poke fans. Welcome back to Poke Relaxing, the only PokeTube content guaranteed not to give you strokes, heart attacks, convulsions, or other fits of rage and anger. Today I wanted to talk about booster box condition, folks. My last video was about recent acquisitions, which included a number of Sword and Shield Era Booster Box products, and having those new acquisitions kind of out made me want to actually pull out all of my Sword and Shield loose booster boxes to kind of see what I've got. And in doing so, one thing I realized is that I have a pretty wide variety of conditions on the boxes that I hold. I'm going to switch over here to a different camera. Actually, I have not done this before where I've got kind of a camera pointing in front of me, but I wanted to sort of show you the booster boxes that I've got out here a little bit more up close and personal. So here's what we've got. I will say the boxes I do not have here are Evolving Skies, and I think that's it. I think actually everything else, Sword and Shield, I have out here. So I wanted to talk about booster box condition because I've been thinking more about it lately as I've purchased more and more booster boxes online as opposed to in person, where you could, make some assessment of condition before you buy. I'm essentially buying everything blind. On eBay, you can buy booster boxes where you can actually in the listing see the exact booster box that you've got. So that is one way you can purchase online and also have some sense of the condition, assuming you trust the person selling to give you the booster box that you actually received. And I think that's probably the way to go for certainly higher end booster boxes, things over like $1,000. You'd want to definitely see what condition the box is in before you buy it. But for these kind of relatively lower end boxes, I'm I don't know if I would say comfortable, but I'm resigned to the fact that if I want to get halfway decent deals off of eBay, I'm going to have to buy sight unseen and hope that things show up in relatively decent condition. So that's what I do. And I've certainly got a range of conditions in things that I've purchased online without having seen them beforehand. So I wanted to talk about kind of how I approach condition of boxes, or what I think about condition of boxes, because I think as collecting sealed booster boxes continues or even gains in momentum, we will see more collectors focusing on the condition of a box when you go to sell it. And already you can see that boxes that have some condition issues in sort of eBay listings will go for less than boxes where it appears to be a very minty, crispy box with no issues whatsoever. So all right, so with that, I'm going to kind of rearrange things here so I can sort of show you some of these boxes up close and we can kind of get into the nitty-gritty. All right, 1 second. Okay, here we are with a slightly different view of things. So let's start. I want to show you possibly the most beat up box that I have. Yeah, I think this would probably be it. So unfortunately, it's one of the more valuable boxes in this lot here. This is a Fusion Strike box, and I bought 3 of these from a seller when they were about $720, I think, in kind of market price on TCG Player. He was selling them for I think $649, And I ordered them up, and then I got an email from the guy saying, hey, I just wanted you to be aware, these are kind of my, final boxes in a case that I opened, or several cases that I opened, and they're, they've definitely got some wear and tear, as reflected in the the lower price on these, which is a little bit disappointing, because it's like, well, okay, you could have said that in the in the sale, and this was on just their website. I found them through the the Shopify app, and where you can search like a bunch of independent online stores that use that Shopify service to create their stores, which is what I use to create my online store, hotcardboard.com. And so, anyways, I said, in response to the guy, I said, that is understandable. Can you, just confirm that like none of the damage is, going to harm or would have harmed any of the packs, and there's no like tears or rips or cuts in the plastic packaging. And so he did, and I said, okay, well, I'll definitely take them. And he sent them in, and at that point, I mean, I sort of understood that, look, if there were no rips or tears in these things, there was just no way I was going to return these. That would just be sort of unreasonable and rude. So I was hoping for the best. And, what I got back was two, pretty decent boxes, and then one box that's definitely seen better days. And I'll show you the condition issues, because this is a great way to see the types of issues, the variety of issues that you can have with booster box condition. So first of all, the little part that is perforated here, that you can tear when you open it up and then create the display, like that is fully perforated pretty much throughout the whole thing. And so on a minty box, and I'm going to just kind of maybe do a side by side here, it's basically completely intact, right? There's maybe a little bit of raise in the little peak here of this. This is on a Sun and Moon base set, but the perforation is all intact. It hasn't been, ripped through or torn, and so the top is flat, right? That's a very minty box, and it's getting harder and harder to find boxes like that. This is sort of the opposite. Like the perforation is entirely poked through, and there's even a tear in the top part here. You can see that white paper there where it's torn off. So, clearly this has been pressed, in this way. If it was in a booster box case, it would have been, kind of maybe like this if it was, on its short end, and then, it goes through shipping and kind of, and then, just the pressure, if this was the bottom box, the pressure of the 5 other boxes in there would squish down on it, and you get something like this. But that doesn't really hurt the packs. The packs are fine. They can be pressed on, very significantly without any damage. So that's the top of the box, and that is something that, kind of is the first thing often that you see on a booster box to assess the condition. And the next thing I'll talk about is the wrapping. So Fusion Strike booster boxes, actually, I feel like a lot of the other sets from Sword and Shield have some pretty major issues with loose wrapping. You can see it's kind of wrinkly, it's not tight, and it definitely doesn't present as well as a box that's wrapped tightly, as we'll see in the one I just showed you. This has no real looseness to it. It's nice and firm, and it just seems like a much more orderly and attractive way to wrap these things. I ordered I had a case of Brilliant Stars, and there was one box in there. I think if I can find it. I don't know if I can sort of find it at this point, but and it had like super loose wrapping, and this also has loose wrapping, and I think part of that is, it's been sort of squished up a little bit, creating these tears and the loss of perforation, and that has created a little extra give, or a little extra room for the wrapping to become kind of soft and loose. So the kind of the wrapping and the, you know, the issues with the top of the box are somewhat related in that way. But long story short is there's a variety of kind of looseness versus tightness on the wrapping for booster boxes, and that's especially true in the Sword and Shield era. I've not seen this issue with like XY era and before boxes. Things generally seem pretty consistently tightly wrapped in the case of boxes before Sword and Shield, and it also doesn't seem to be an issue for Scarlet and Violet. So I don't know if this was just something going on in the factory where they wrapped Sword and Shield era boxes, or if they just had, you know, I don't know, looser constraints back then or what, but it does seem to be a Sword and Shield era kind of phenomenon, these very loose wraps, which you often see. So you want to see a tighter wrap. It just looks better. It certainly presents better. It shows the box, you know, better, because you don't have a lot of this, you know, kind of bundled up, scrunched up packaging kind of obscuring the view. And that's the long and short of the wrapping. So the next thing I want to talk about is actually related to the wrapping, but it's not the tightness, it's the condition of the wrapping. So if you see on these little logos here, these little Pokeball logos that are featured on, you know, the wrapping for all of Sword and Shield era boxes and most other eras as well, you know, there's some scratches, right? This is not a very you know, durably printed logo on here. So this comes off quite easily if you scratch against it. I just ran my fingernail and you see it created a scratch right there. So you can kind of tell how much, you know, sort of life or abuse a booster box has taken by looking at the condition of these logos and the ink that's used to print them. You know, the more this box just kind of sits around in inventory where it's kind of moved in and out, maybe knocks up against other boxes and stuff like that, the more it's going to have these little scratches. And so if you look at a box like that and you compare it again to our Sword and Shield base box here, which it's funny, I got a bunch of these from the same store, and it's clear they were pulled from a sealed case and had not seen much wear and tear, because boy, they are crispy. But all of the logos on this one are pretty much scratch free. So this is a very, very minty box that has seen very little, you know, use and abuse compared to sorry, my daughter's screaming upstairs, but that is you know, very crispy compared to, for example, look at this one. This is crazy. It's almost completely worn off, this logo on Fusion Strike here, but this box otherwise actually looks very nice. It's pretty tight, and there is some loss of perforation, but it's pretty flat. And actually, I was noticing on those Battle Styles boxes from my earlier vid, a lot of, or my one that I did like last video, like the logos on this one are just completely gone from the top. Like, believe it or not, there were logos there once you can kind of see their trace, and those are sort of logos on the side. So the top definitely had some, I don't know, some sort of friction happening in the life of this box. And again, this was supposed to be from a sealed case, but I just got like an opened case. So I don't know what, you know, kind of abuse those were taking, but whatever it was, it definitely impacted those logos. So those logos are another thing you can look at to kind of see how much, see how much life, you know, a box has lived through before getting to, here's a Silver Tempest that has really fresh looking logos on this that have almost no scratches. And so the last thing I'll note, if I can find that one, the super abused Fusion Strike box. You know, the last thing, which I think is kind of the most obvious, so I sort of leave it just to mention quickly, is, you know, if there are dents in the box. Now, the front here doesn't seem to have many, you know, dents, but on the back here, if you look at this, you know, this clearly has a dent here and there's some creases, that go along with that. So that's definitely, one of the more abused booster boxes that I own. Other sides seem fine, but if you have dents in a box, that's definitely a pretty significant condition issue, and I would never expect to get like market price for this box. In fact, I sort of think for, some of the more abused boxes, particularly ones that have dents like that or tears in the cardboard itself, or maybe a cut in the packaging, which I have one box I want to show you that does have a cut in the packaging if I can find it. I think it was a Lost Origin. Maybe it was Brilliant Stars. Well, now I can't find it. All right, I don't know where that one went, but I did have one that had a cut. Oftentimes, what happens with these booster boxes, they come in a case like this, and the the top flaps go over of the cardboard case that they're in, fold this way, and then there's a tape going over the middle, and then you cut through that tape. So oftentimes you'll see, a little cut mark here that can go through the plastic and or kind of score the cardboard from, the knife or the box opener that's used to get into there. And that definitely is a challenge to resale value, and it's very common to see that. Actually, here it is. It was Brilliant Stars. So this is actually otherwise a very nice box, but you see that line where the cardboard is scored. Well, that's also a cut through the. You can see the. Actually, it's not completely cut right there, so I'll kind of try to keep that somewhat sealed up there. But that's another common condition issue that you see in booster boxes. So you may be asking yourself, why is this clown telling me all these condition issues? Well, I'm telling you what to look for if you have the chance to inspect a box, either from an eBay listing or in person, or after you've received a box if you bought it sight unseen, like I often do. Because if your box has maybe 2 or 3 of these issues, and you paid like full market price for it, you might consider whether or not you wanted to keep that box, or to perhaps return it based on the idea that what you paid for doesn't quite match up to the value that you received, and that you should have been able to assume that a box is going to arrive without like 3 condition issues. Maybe it has 1 issue, or 2 issues that are minor. So if you know what to look for, you've got a better chance at kind of avoiding some of these kinds of problems as you inspect boxes for purchase, and as you inspect boxes that you've received if you've bought them online sight unseen. So that's kind of what I wanted to go through, the sorts of things that I look for. Next, I want to talk about how to protect these boxes, and I want to show you kind of the gold standard of booster box collection, and it's certainly the acrylic case. You'll see these all over the place at card shows for higher end boxes. Certainly anything like kind of $1,000 or above is likely to be in one of these cases. And these, I think I sell these on my site, hotcardboard.com, for like $20 a piece, which is fairly competitive. Let me get the damn thing out of here. Well, this is definitely some tape or adhesive. So that's what they look like. I'm going to take one of these out because I want to put one of the nicer Fusion Strikes in here. But, for $20, if you're protecting a Fusion Strike box, which I think they're now up to $800, because Sword and Shield is on a, kind of a bull run at the moment. Who knows how long that will last, or how far it will go. Doesn't really matter to me, except that I want to buy more things. It does make them a bit more out of reach. Okay, so here's what they, look like. Very clear. see through. These are closed by magnetic seals, so you have to be a little bit careful. They're fairly, strong. So I could probably even hold the box upside down, and not have it fall out. But if you were to kind of shake it, it would definitely fall out. So you want to avoid that. So let me see which maybe the best sword and shield. This one's pretty nice. So put this in here. You want to be careful not to kind of scratch the sides. And then you put this bad boy on there. Wow, those are very strong. And I kind of, so there is it upside down. I can shake it a little bit. It won't come out. Actually, I could probably shake it quite a bit. It won't come out, but I don't really want to get too crazy with these things. But, best practice is if you're going to travel with this thing, put a little painter's tape on there for the ride. So in case you happen to pick it up and whoosh, like that, it doesn't go flying out, which would be very bad. So this is the gold standard for protecting a booster box. I want to go grab something actually from inventory to show you because there are alternatives. One sec. Okay, so if, spending $20 on a booster box is not something you get particularly excited about, or you have sort of a lower end box you want to protect a little bit, but don't want to protect, to the tune of $20, you can get these things. Okay, these are kind of, sort of semi-rigid plastic boxes that, you fold. You see this kind of plastic here. This is wrapping that is all over the box and comes off, and it, protects the box from having gotten scratched from shipping and so forth. So I don't think they do this on all of these kinds. This is just the place I got them from, does this plastic wrap here. It's a little bit annoying because you got to take it off, each time you use one of these, which I'd certainly prefer not to do. But it does keep it nice and minty. And I even sometimes keep the bottom on there. But anyways, you take these bad boys and fold them out here. So I'm going to leave the plastic on the bottom there just because it's like you don't see it. So why bother yourself with the trouble is my philosophy. So you fold it up, and these run about, I think, like $2. I think I bought these kind of in a large, group for like, I think probably $1 a piece. I don't have these up for sale. I don't know if I'd ever really, oops, I'm kind of going around here. I don't know if I would buy a ton of these and list them, just because I don't tend to use them a lot. I kind of just feel like I try to take care of my boxes as best I can if they're not in a acrylic case, and then if they reach the point where they need to be in an acrylic case, I'll put one in. So there you have it. That's what it looks like. And then you slide your box, and I have one of these with a box in it. This is my Unbroken Bonds box. It's funny, when I put this in, I think it was right after I got it, and I paid $800 for this box, like, I don't know, 8-9 months ago. Now I think it's worth probably $2,000 to $3,000. So I probably should move it over to an acrylic, but I'm way too lazy for that. It's protected. It's in there. It's fine. It's just sitting in my display case. But this is what they look like. So if you wanted to see that, and boy, this is a really minty box. This Unbroken Bonds here, no perforation. Pretty tight seals. Love the Espion Gardevoir on the side of that box. I haven't really sort of appreciated a lot of these boxes that I have gotten from the older kind of Sun and Moon XY eras. Yeah, Lucario there on the top, so very cool. So anyways, you can get these for, again, if you buy probably a dozen of them or something, like, you can probably get them for $1.50 online, and that's a pretty cost-effective way to store these things. And if you have a higher end box, you can definitely get those acrylics. So I wanted to talk just for a second about something that I kind of have thought a lot about in relation to, the condition of booster boxes, sealed booster boxes, moving forward. And that's that, I feel like the sort of idea of collecting sealed booster boxes is, as a like a super popular thing, very new, right? There have always been people who've collected older sealed stuff, but the number of people that do that now is so much higher in the last, 1 to 2 years, just because of, the appreciation that you have seen in the market prices of a lot of these sealed booster boxes. And so I have two thoughts on that. And one is that, there, I think, will be a clearer and clearer premium for booster boxes that are in, very minty condition, that have none of the condition issues that I showed you in the first part of this video. So I think, what I want to do is go to as many card shows as I can, which is not that many, because I live in a part of the world that doesn't really have that many shows. And I want to find, minty boxes that I can confirm have none of the condition issues that I've seen. And I want to pay, market price, or maybe a slight, premium to market price for those boxes. And then, put them away in this kind of case, or in a acrylic case if they're a higher end box, and just start to, build the number of super minty boxes that I've got. And I've sort of pulled out, all of these boxes here to my left, with the intention that I want to kind of find the mintier ones, get them into, better protection, and then sort of make sure I'm segregating those from the rest of the boxes in the collection, because I feel that it's inevitable that, sort of nicer, crispier boxes will sell for more in the future, in a more sort of predictable and a more definable way than they do now. Now I think, maybe your box sells a little faster. Maybe you get a premium for it on a place like eBay. But mostly I think it's just that you kind of get dinged if your box, is beaten up. And then the mintier boxes, probably sell for the same price as boxes that have like one or two of the condition issues. And so there's not much of a premium right now on the mintier boxes, but I feel that there will be. And relatedly, I think there will be a premium on sealed cases of not only booster boxes, but ETBs and everything else, because of these kinds of condition issues and the difficulty of finding, pristine boxes. I think that if you have a case that looks like it's nice, like it hasn't been shipped, through the mail in just the sort of original case and not like double boxed as it should be, I think you will get a real premium. And we're starting to see sealed case premiums for certain products already, but I think that will get more and more pronounced over time as people realize it's pretty hard to find, minty condition booster boxes. And if you have a sealed case, you have a good shot of having some pretty nice boxes inside there. So, I think when I started collecting sealed, like in whatever, about a year and a half ago, I don't think there was any real premium for sealed cases. And I remember there were content creators, kind of in the Pokemon investing space, saying there's no need to keep your sealed cases sealed because there's no premium. And I think that was probably true back then, but I think that has changed, in the past 6 to 12 months. I think it will be extremely clear in the next 12 months. So that's one sort of thought / prediction that I have for the sealed kind of booster and other, product ETB marketplace. The other thing that I wanted to say, that I think about this a lot, and maybe I shouldn't say it publicly because I feel like nobody talks about this. So maybe it's something I should be turning into a business idea of my own. But yeah, I only have 32 subscribers, so whatever, no one's going to know about. But folks, there is a major need in the Pokemon market right now. And I'll tell you what it's for. It is for authentication and grading services for sealed product. Okay? There is nobody who is selling people the service of examining a box, confirming that in their expert opinion it is unsealed, untampered, and or grading that box to tell you, at a somewhat quantifiable level, how much abuse it has taken and how much sort of discount it should, be at compared to a, gem mint or mint condition box. The amount of money that's being invested in the sealed Pokemon space in the past 12 months, to me, makes it, like criminal that these services don't exist. I think you would make, $50 million in like 2 years if you put together a business. Thanks to my daughter for making this video very noisy and unprofessional. But I think you could make so much money if you gathered up, a handful of experts and were able to produce a service where you could pay, maybe $25 on the low end, up to, you could. What the heck? I don't know. Some iPods or iPads talking to me. If you could tell people that, a box is, untampered with, I think that it would take so much of the risk out of buying, these boxes. I mean, if you want to buy a box like this right now, it's, whatever, $2,000, let's say. Now with Unbroken Bonds, there, I don't think were too many counterfeits, if any, of this, but like something like Evolutions, there is a mountain of counterfeit Evolution boxes out there. And, if you don't know what you're doing, you take a pretty big risk by buying an Evolutions, XY Evolutions booster box for market price of, I think, $1,500 right now. By the way, I think that's the steal of the century in the XY era, because that set was, super overhyped at the time of, release and for like 2 years after. But it's a really cool set with a lot of cool cards in it. And, it's Gen 1 Pokemon. So anyways, it shouldn't be $1,500 if this is $2,000. I digress. But, if you're buying something like Evolutions or any of the other boxes that have known sort of counterfeits out there, you're taking a pretty big risk. And the average person who collects or wants to invest in Pokemon cards, is not going to want to figure out all the things you need to figure out in order to authenticate a box. Somebody like me, like, I do the best I can. And, I'm pretty smart about things, how I approach them and how I, purchase my particularly higher end boxes, where I get them from and stuff like that. But the average person doesn't want to do that. And even the average investor that spends maybe, $10,000 a box isn't going to want to do that. They're going to want to pay somebody to do that for them who is much better at it. And that's exactly why graded cards exist. That's exactly why authenticated sealed products in the sports card world exist. And, the elephant in the room here is that, the main company that authenticated or that authenticates sports card boxes today used to do Pokemon products. I don't know if they ever did booster boxes, but they did sealed booster cases. And if you don't know, there was a major sort of scandal where Logan Paul, who's a big Pokemon collector, bought, a sealed case, a first edition base set booster boxes for like $2 or $3 million, and had it authenticated by this company, Baseball Card Exchange, aka BBCE, and later, decided to open up the case to confirm, that the boxes in it were legit. Well, they opened up the case. They brought the CEO of BBCE on this video, and they found out that the boxes were fake. They were filled with, the booster boxes themselves were real. The case was real, but somebody had taken all the packs out and put, junk packs like G.I. Joe packs in there instead. So, they felt like the right weight and, heft, I don't know what they had the right heft in the case. So they, had been authenticated, and, Steve Hart from BBCE kind of went through all these things that he looked at on the tape on the sealed case, and it said all the other kind of the label and things like that, and what he looked for, and basically he got it wrong. So so at that point the company BBCE said we're not gonna do Pokemon anymore because obviously it resulted in bad things when we did that. So we're not going to do that anymore. Kudos to them, I guess, for admitting their error. I don't know if they ever sort of issued an apology or anything like that, but you can imagine they probably did in person, and and they took action. They said, look, we're admitting we don't know how to do this properly, so we're not going to do it at all, and we're not going to make money from doing something that we shouldn't be doing. And so I say kudos to them. I still use BBCE all the time for sports cards, non-sports cards, which they are certainly more expert on than they ever were on Pokemon. But the thing that I remember, and by the way, apologies, this is turning into a long video. The thing that I remember from that whole affair was that, the way that it sort of came about is, this idea of checking to see if those boxes were actually real, even though the case was authenticated. The way that they came about is there basically started to be, like rumor mill chatter about that case, that, the purchase of it was very publicized by Logan Paul, who's one of the largest social media stars in the country. And people, in the Pokemon collecting world started to talk about like how they think there are some red flags with that case, because there were pictures of it available. There was information from like prior sales of it. There was definitely some sketchiness to, kind of where it came from and how it came about and how it was like sort of listed initially. And so people started to, say, hey, what kind of, investigation could we do to figure out like all of the red flags with this? And so, there were, I think, like 2 or 3 people who were kind of leading the charge, who were, real experts in sealed Pokemon stuff. And they started to do like, I think there was a thread on Poke Beach talking about how there were all these red flags, and here's what they see, and they zoomed in on the photos, and they kind of really brought the receipts, and they said they think there's some sketchy stuff with this box, and I think that's what caused Logan Paul to want to try to figure that out definitively, whether or not there were issues with it. So anyways, long story short is I'm like, well, why don't the people who did that, or people like them, the people who were doing this investigation online for free or for entertainment value, I guess, one of those people, like, lend their hand to a company that wants to authenticate this stuff. Why don't they go work for BBCE or for a new company? Again, I think if you could pay $25 to authenticate, maybe like a Sword and Shield air box, it would be totally worth it, because now they'd probably charge like $50 actually, because you probably put it in a, in a acrylic case and, put a label on it, and that definitely takes some effort. You have to pay all the people to do the authentication. But I almost feel like at like $100 it would still be worth it, because it's an $800 booster box. If you could, get it authenticated, maybe it adds $100, $200 of value to it. Certainly we see the significant extra value that authenticating a card, in a PSA holder, usually if it's a PSA 10 only, but or a sports card box, if you have a box of, 1986 Topps football cards, and you get that authenticated, the difference between the price in that versus an unauthenticated box is, several $100s at least. So, I don't know. I think there's a big, there's a big need for this service. I think it would provide a ton of value to, the sort of collecting community. And I think that, it's such a no-brainer in my view. I feel like it has to happen. Maybe it's not going to happen unless I do it and try to hire some of these folks from the Poke Beach thread. But I don't know. I just think, well, the point I want to make, though, is that if that does happen, I think it adds a ton of credibility and predictability and stability to, like how I said stability, like stability, to the marketplace of sealed booster boxes, because I think it eliminates a lot of the, just overall risk in the marketplace if you at least have as an option the ability to get a box authenticated, never mind graded. If you start seeing graded boxes, just like you see graded cards really revolutionize a lot of the single card marketplace in both Pokemon and sports cards, I think you would see sort of a revolution in interest in the sealed product space if you had, a credible, reasonably priced service that could authenticate sealed product, do it in a relatively timely fashion, not take like a year to authenticate a box. I just think it would be so useful, so valuable, and really sort of game changing to the sealed product marketplace if something like that existed. So I hope it happens. I hope it doesn't require me to figure out how to do it, because I don't know, I get more and more tempted every day to, I don't know, just quit my day job and work on that, because I really think you could do it quite reasonably. So anyways, if you happen to be one of these people that has a long experience, long history and experience with authenticating sealed booster boxes, let me know. And we'll team up. All right, folks, that's what we got for today. I hope you're doing fantastic, collecting great things out there. And until next time, stay relaxed. Bye now.